I could never, in my wildest nightmares, have ever imagined the horrors that could plague even the most simple of life's enjoyments. The darkness that could invade any world, whether it be real or fictional. It all started the day me and my girlfriend were talking about video games we used to play growing up, and games that we used to enjoy. Over the years of my childhood, I have collected several games pertaining to several different consoles, but we both found the topic of the Nintendo 64 to be the most fun. So that day, we decided to pick up one from my uncle's video game store, and perhaps even pick up one of the great... Wait a minute, who owns a video games store? It's gonna be GameStop. Your uncle's... What is he running out of his shed? Okay, sorry. And perhaps even pick up one of the greatest Nintendo 64 titles, Super Mario 64. Now, when we got there, it took some time and a lot of browsing, but we were able to find the game after about an hour or so in several bins he had placed throughout the store, because that's what you do when you own a store that's selling Nintendo 64 games almost 20 years after the Nintendo 64 came out. Anyway, okay, the only copy he had, it appeared. What? As well as that, we had found an N64, the very last one that he had in stock, ironically. And the best part about it was, he gave it to us for free. Considering he's probably not a taxpayer and not running a legitimate business, I think maybe this wasn't a store. He told me that it had been bought and returned nearly 15 times since it came into his possession, and now he was just looking to get rid of it. He also told me that, ironically, the game was always returned with it as well, as they always seemed to be bought together. He had heard that something was wrong with one or the other, and that some people even went as far as to tell him that they were evil, made in hell, things like that. Alright, that last paragraph, there's so many things wrong with it. Seeing as how he had only heard the story from 3 out of 15 customers. How oddly specific. I brushed it off as just some hysterical story told by people who decided they simply didn't want to keep the system. An excuse, if you will, and gave him $20 for Super Mario 64. Cheap jerk gave me the N64 for free, though. Wait, what? He's a cheap jerk, and he sells you a Nintendo 64 console and Super Mario 64 for $20. That would have cost about, I don't know, something like $260, almost $300 back in the day. You ungrateful little prick. We went back home after being gone for about an hour and a half. When I got home, I laid the system by my living room TV and started to rummage through old boxes where I kept all sorts of old games, ranging from classic Atari games to the ever-popular Dreamcast. Is that supposed to be irony? Because the Dreamcast was so unpopular that it essentially failed, and Sega never released another system. Anyway, I give up. It was actually sort of strange, because in these boxes I found that I owned every major console except for an N64. Well, until now anyways. I pulled out my box with all of the N64 games in it and began to dig through it. I found games like The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, as well as its sequel, Majora's Mask, and 2 Castlevania titles for the system itself, Castlevania 64 / Legacy of Darkness. Actually, those 2 games are basically identical, but maybe I'll explain that one day. And so on. Then it was time to hook it up. After everything was set up, my girlfriend decided that, holy fuck, it is taking a long time to get to this fucking game. After some effort, the game was ready to go. "It's me, Mario!" it called out in its upbeat pitch. My girlfriend I don't think that's how the game, is that how it started? I don't remember. My girlfriend decided to mess with Mario's face a bit before finally pressing start on her purple controller, and the screen transitioned to the file select screen. There were some files already on the game. In fact, all 4 slots were filled, each having just started the game because there were no stars on any file. So we started deleting them. After we deleted one, however, I don't even think, I think it just stays on new unless you get enough stars to continue the game anyway. I don't even care. Yeah, that's wrong. After we deleted one file, however, the game froze, and there was a deafening screech coming from our TV speakers, and it sounded almost as if someone was screaming from the game itself. Creepypasta cliché number 1, random screaming. My girlfriend turned off the system after about 5 seconds. After a moment or so, she flipped it back on, and we went back to the file select screen. Strangely enough, the file that we had deleted on file 1 was back, and this time it had 66 stars. Okay, the number 66, creepypasta cliché number 2, even though it previously had none. So once more she deleted it, and again it made a loud screeching sound. "Jesus Christ, woman, the thing is alive!" This time, I swear to God, it was louder than before, because that's what matters. To the point where we both fell back while covering our ears. As I was closer to the plug than the system itself, I jerked it out of the wall. I don't know what that means. This time, before we bothered trying, you know what I learned is that when something doesn't make sense in these stories, don't try to make sense of it. This time, before we bothered trying, I took the game out of the system and took it into the kitchen. It turned out that it was really dusty. Oh, well, that explains the screaming. Which explained, at least to me, why the game was reacting the way it was. Oh, it was screaming. That's because there was just a little bit too much dust in the console. Every time your video game console screams at you. Although it was still weird. Yeah, I'd say so. After cleaning it up with a Q-tip, I don't think that's how you're supposed to clean it. With a Q-tip? Why? I took it back into the living room. I handed it to her. She plugged the console back into the wall and we were ready to go. Actually, I think a Q-tip with alcohol does work on discs. By now it was getting dark out. There was no light in the room, and we couldn't plug in our lamp because the system and TV took up the outlet. So we were forced to play in the dark. Or we could be in the ownership of a fucking power strip. For me, something didn't feel right, because for some reason I was filled with a sense of nervousness that I could not quite explain. I shook it off and turned off the system. When we were back to the file select screen, each file that was there previously was gone, oddly enough, which to me confirmed my suspicion that this is really hard to read, it was just a dirty game messing up. So we started a new game on file 1, and the screen lagged like it were a CD or something, but after about a minute started up normally. We got to the opening scene with Peach inviting Mario to the castle, and the camera, as usual, followed up the pathway to the giant green pipe which Mario leaped out of. She was in control of the game and took Mario directly to the castle. When she opened the door to the castle, there was a prolonged pause which made me nervous. Once again, the loud screeching that ruined our game previously shot through our ears, and it felt like glass was jabbed into my eardrums. We were both overwhelmed because of the terrible screaming and could not even think to reach to the system to the plug. What? Reach to the system to the plug? What the fuck does that mean? And I mean, why didn't you just think to just turn the console off or reset it or maybe continue listening to the fucking screaming? After about 30 seconds, it stopped, and we looked up